Welcome back to Freestyle with the Scooters. And we are so excited because we have our first education professional with us today, as the education system in PA just shut down for the end of the year. So I think it's really fitting that we have you today. We're going to be airing this a little later, but RJ Thompson, who is a professor to all, it seems, because he works both at Point Park University and Pitt, University of Pittsburgh. So we want to thank you so much for being with us today to talk through what's going on in the educational segment during COVID-19. And you could probably do a better job explaining what you do than I can, because you do so much. So I don't want to limit that with he just teaches. He does so much more than that.
Yeah, I've got a lot going on. So by day, I'm the Associate Director of Student Engagement in the College of Business Administration, which is the undergraduate business college at the University of Pittsburgh. So that's a long way of saying I basically run marketing communications for the undergraduate program.
Oh, wow.
And in the evenings, I adjunct teach. I teach a brand management course in the business college at Pitt. And then I also teach graphic design at Point Park. Previous to joining Pitt, I'm still in my first year at the university, but previous to that, I was a tenured professor of graphic design at Youngstown State University.
Oh, wow.
So,
What brought you to Pitt? What brought you to University of Pittsburgh?
So I've actually been living in Pittsburgh since 2003. And the past 7.5 years, I was at Youngstown State. So I was driving to Youngstown every day. Previous to that, I taught at Carnegie Mellon for a year, LaRoche College or LaRoche University for 2 years, taught at Edinburgh. I've been all over the place.
Yeah, you have.
Oh, yeah.
The differences between Pitt and Point Park in terms of what you're teaching and how do you do, which one do you like better?
Ooh.
Throw down.
Well, this is an interesting question because I've been teaching graphic design for over a decade. And just this semester is my first experience teaching in a business college. So the challenges between the two are really quite dissimilar. So I would say, while I do love teaching at Point Park and I enjoy my students very much, the new learning that I'm gaining through teaching in a business school is really kind of on the top of my mind. So one of the things that I've always done in my design classes is, and I have a background in entrepreneurship and I run my own company and things like that. But one of the things I always taught my Point Park students was bringing entrepreneurship into the design classroom. Teach these folks how to become good professionals, smart professionals, freelancers, business owners, etc. And now that I'm teaching a class in the business college at Pitt, I'm able to bring the design context to marketing students and business students and teach them how to properly integrate visual communications into their work. So it's been really refreshing in that respect.
And so you've been in Pittsburgh since 2003. How long have you been a professor for? That same amount of time?
No, I started teaching in 2009. So I've been doing this for over 10 years. I've been a designer for 24 though.
Oh, wow.
I started designing when I was 11 years old.
Oh my gosh. Now, did you work like in an agency or a company before you switched, or?
So while I've always run a company simultaneous to teaching. So when I first started, I had my first practice based on the north side of Pittsburgh. I had a few employees. I was like 25. It was insane. I merged that into another company called Shift Collaborative, which is still around. And then I sold my shares out of that, sold another company that I had started. And now I'm in my fourth company called Plus Public, which is this logo right here.
Oh, wow, there you go.
And Plus Public is a design research practice that specifically works with municipal governments on developing branded communication platforms to spark community engagement and economic development revitalization through marketing, design, and communications. So I've always been an entrepreneur, had my hand in a bunch of different things, and that still holds true, even though I'm on the staff side of academia now.
And then for the other 2 hours, you try to sleep, obviously, because you do so many.
You know, I'm in bed by 10.
There you go.
I sleep the whole night. I sleep really well. I think what it really comes down to is just time management. So like during the day, like I try to maintain as hyper focused as I can on the things that I need to do and just prioritize and trust the people that you have to work with to do their part.
So with everything shifting now to virtual learning, how quickly were you guys able to ramp in either Point Park or Pitt? How quickly did all of that change, and how is the communications from the schools to the professors and to the staff and to the students?
Well, I can only really speak for myself and my experiences, and then kind of anecdotally what I've learned from others, especially the students. But for me, I have a background in learning management systems research. So I've always maintained some sort of online version of my classes. And in fact, my strategy with teaching is I take all of the course content and I put it online the very first day of class. So if you want to know what the final is going to be, it's there. If you want to know when the tests are, or even what the test content may be like, it's there. Everything is available, and I prefer doing that for the benefit of the students. One, they can manage their schedule, they can manage their expectations, they can prioritize and schedule and plan their time appropriately. But also, I don't surprise them with anything. They know what's expected of them, and hopefully through the content that I offer in the classes, they can see the content as being a valuable asset in their portfolios. So they ideally endeavor to develop good or high quality work product related to that. So I've always had my stuff online in some capacity or not. It was a hard transition across the board for my colleagues at Pitt, at Point Park, even at other universities throughout the country. I have a lot of peers through my networks there, which is really why students got a second week of spring break.
Right.
Basically let faculty prepare that class online. And ultimately what I'm finding is that most people are holding Zoom lectures live, which has its own sort of problem sets, especially with respect to the location of our students. So at Pitt, I've got a student who had to go back to Spain, right? So I can't expect that person to live tune in to my lectures. So I have to record those, put them online, and then just kind of hope he watches them. So we're kind of limping along across the board to the end of the semester, to graduation. And, you know, I think the biggest thing for me here is that students and faculty both have a shared sense of empathy toward one another. You know, the courses that we've designed for our students, especially if you look at it from a product management point of view, if you look at our course shells as products, like our students are not going to get 100% value out of that product because we've had to pivot and modify our curricula. So as a consequence of that, you know, everyone's at a disadvantage. And I would say that the faculty probably feel the worst off about that, because they know that by virtue of these things that are happening to all of us collectively, we're underserving our students. So we're trying to pick up that ball and run with it and do the best that we can for the students that we have. On the student side, I've discovered that, you know, their morale is really low. Some students have had jobs lined up, internships lined up that are either being canceled or delayed. A lot of my students at Pitt, for example, they get recruited before they even graduate by big corporations, right? So Dick's Sporting Goods, for example, just announced that they're furloughing a variety of their staff, including recruiters. So if I had students that had jobs lined up at Dick's, then they may not have those opportunities available to them now. At Point Park, you know, I'm teaching my students to be very, you know, to create their own successes. So really focusing on hey, you might be at home and in self-isolation, but that doesn't mean you can't do freelance work. Like, you can still build a name for yourself while working from home, and take that time to really improve your craft in a very concentrated way. So nevertheless, we're all making the best of it, and despite morale, I think, being low across the board.
Has the colleges or universities come out and said anything about next year in terms of what the landscape will look like?
I would say there's probably some universities that have already committed to changing their plans. Like, so as you said earlier, the state of Pennsylvania basically said, all right, K through 12 is going to be home until the end of the academic year. It stands to reason that most universities are putting all of their summer classes online. I personally see that as a precursor to a online only rollout in the fall. I'm not aware of any universities that have said that they will go online only in the fall. But, just looking at it from, a framework point of view, like, it makes sense that all the summer classes are online as a sort of test of what that would look like in the fall. I don't think anyone wants that, but if we're forced into it, then we'll adapt. I know that like Pitt has canceled their study abroad programming for the fall. Yeah. That announcement came out today. So, just people are planning. I think higher ed in some cases is ahead on some things, but also behind on some other things. And depending on the university, they're somewhere in that spectrum. So I would say if you want to see what's going to happen for the fall, look at the big universities and what they decide, because generally the smaller universities, private or public, will follow suit.
Do you think too, in terms of a technology standpoint for some of these universities, because everything is shifting to online, that they're going to have to spend the summer months or even into the fall adapting how interactive it can be? Because a lot are pass fail currently. Am I correct? So are they going to adjust to make sure that the education isn't lost?
So they're pass or no credit.
Okay.
So basically what this means is I, as the instructor, grade normally as I would. And then the students have the choice to either take the class or use the grade as a pass grade, which does not affect their GPA, or they can choose to do a no credit, which does not affect their GPA either. It's completely up to the student in that respect. So for example, like if I'm an honors student and, my GPA is of critical importance to my success as a student and my career and also sort of my identity, and then I get COVID-19, right? I get a diagnosis, and then I come out of it and just somehow barely pass the class. I would be in a position to only take that class for a pass grade, so it wouldn't affect my GPA. Okay. So I think that was a smart decision on a lot of universities to protect the grade sensitivity as best they could, and especially in a situation where no one has any control, right? So it's been fascinating to me to see how universities and of all sizes handle, acts of God, so to speak. Yeah. As it relates to that, though, like on the technology side, one of the things that I've told my students is that they need to be very aware of the limitations of technology. So I know you two are familiar with what's going on with Zoom and people hacking it. I hope you locked this room. But, with people hacking it and, saying all kinds of just awful racist things or showing, visually inappropriate stuff. I've urged my students to consider things like that disruption, but also encourage them to look at the sort of worldview of communication availability. So for example, I was live lecturing maybe last week, and then my modem went out. My whole neighborhood lost internet, and I was dead in the water. I couldn't do anything. And one of the reasons for that is because, and I called Comcast and they said like, yeah, the system's overused. So everyone's watching Netflix right now, high resolution Netflix. So like there's a strain on communication tools on the internet itself. And no one can fix that.
Right.
So, that's fortunately why I think a lot of my peers are just putting all of our content online and saying, access it when you can.
How much more work during this time has it been on you? Because I don't think there's a little bit of a, well, are you busy? Are you, and I think that, you had to flex so quickly to make everything online, even though you were already using platforms. How much more work has this been on you, and just even like mentally? I mean, there's so much. I think about the relationships that professors have with their students, and now you're not going to see them for the rest of the year. There's a lot of people graduating. You're not going to have graduation. So it's not only like it's all the work that goes into it, but then also just the mental, right?
Yeah. So this is a great question. So I've got
good job. Yeah, that's it. We're done.
I've got a really layered response to this. So I'll start with saying I'm a very extroverted person. I thrive on sort of the energy of others to maintain a certain, presence in my classes. I have a very distinct lecturing style. I like to laugh and have fun in my classes. And fortunately, I can still have some of that in the Zoom calls, but it leaves a lot to be desired. I think not just from my end, but from the students' end. So we're coping with that as much as we can. But I personally am an ultra high risk case, so I haven't really left my property. I have an illness called cystic fibrosis, which is a respiratory disease. Oh, wow. So with the coronavirus being inherently respiratory, like if I were to get it, despite my optimal health, at least for a person with CF, like it could do irreparable damage or kill me. So I haven't left. So how am I coping with that? Well, I also don't like being bored. So I always need to be doing something. I need to be working on something, being creative. And it's been a challenge, but I found one of my sort of coping mechanisms is to talk to folks like you, or to just open up the Zoom call and just start talking to people, or use FaceTime and just try to have as much personal connectivity as I can to people that I care about, my friends, my family, but also my students. So I've maintained that, like, you ever have a question, you need to talk something out, just give me a call. No big deal. I've noticed that my colleagues across the country, at least in graphic design, they primarily teach their classes online. They were not necessarily prepared for an online interpretation of their classes. So as a strategist, I try to kill several birds with one stone as much as I can. And I discovered that since a lot of them weren't prepared, and I have an opportunity to kind of use my coping mechanism of talking to other people and also provide content to my colleagues when they need it the most, by way of having these one-on-one Zoom calls with marketing, design, and communications professionals, and asking them questions similar to what you're asking me, like, where'd you get your start? How's the coronavirus disrupted your life? I record those, put them online, and share those with my people. And it's been really beneficial, especially for the students that are entering an economy that may not have room for them, just because of the loss of jobs. So
is that called Talks with, what is the URL?
Talks with Thompson. So yeah, every episode is titled like, Craig Vicini Talks with Thompson. So yeah. And I didn't want to be another jerk with a podcast, right? Just like a solo guy doing a podcast, but it's been doing pretty well. So, I can't complain.
It's like Bill Burr riding around in his car or talking on his podcast.
Yeah, there it is.
Right?
Whatever you can do. Whatever you can do during this time, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, my recordings are just as grounded and authentic as it gets. I don't do any production on them. So if there's an error, like, roll with it. I don't, at least for what I'm doing, I don't like the commoditization of it. I just want to share resources and share life experience for my students that are going to be hungry for career successes. And I think a lot of them are feeling like this is a big false start. They're getting ready to graduate, they're super motivated, and then the economy comes to a grinding halt and has no room for them. How do you pick up from that? I don't know.
Right.
Interestingly enough, a lot of the people that I've spoken to started their careers in the last recession.
Yes.
So there's a lot of one-on-one relatability there.
It really is. And I think you're really smart to help them think about what their own brand is and how to carve niches for themselves, you know, during this time, because there are companies that need help, and you have somebody that's eager and willing to help in the design side. There are a lot of small businesses that are like, I still need to get my message out. I still need to do this. I don't know how to do that, and to be able to help. So I think that's fantastic.
I agree.
You know, what's interesting about that is that, you know, even if we, with the shape of the economy at present, and even if it, you know, transitions into a full-blown recession, people are still going to have to advertise.
Yes.
They're still going to have to market. They're still going to have to communicate. So I would say there's actually more opportunity than ever for young practitioners to cut their teeth on small, low-risk clients and then build up to that. And especially with them working remotely, I think that's also proven that in order to thrive, you don't need to have a brick and mortar shop. You don't have to knock on people's doors. You don't have to go to their place of business. You can do all of this work from the comfort of your own home. Right. So I see the nature of jobs also evolving after this point, which is great because it cuts down on their expenses, hopefully helps them make more income.
Yes.
And, you know, only to pay back their student loans or whatever.
Speaking of that, are the schools doing anything in terms of compensation or, you know, with the classes being, I mean, they lost a week of classes. I don't know if that matters. I skipped a lot of classes. So really, you know, I don't be happy with that. Sorry, Mom and Dad. Sorry about that. But I mean, are they saying anything about that, or is it just, you know, get the education as you can and you've already paid for it?
So if you lived on campus in like residence halls, I think I would say a majority of universities are giving refunds, or at least prorated refunds if you lived on campus. I'm not aware of any universities providing refunds for classes. A lot of that sort of comes down to the credit structure of a class. So, yeah, I don't think there's been any situations like that where refunds have been offered, unless like there were some incredible extreme circumstances. You know, an example of this would be a lot of graduate level art students, for example, fine art students want refunds, complete refunds, because they can't access the painting lab, the printmaking lab, the brick and mortar labs that they need access to actually do their work. Yeah. And I think that at least in the fine art realm of higher ed, that was something that has completely thrown them off, and that's a hard challenge to problem solve your way out of. So I don't know what'll happen there. I know universities just in general do not want to give refunds of any kind, but also really don't want to do that for credit classes. So there may be some opportunities to come in the following months leading into the fall semester. But
has there been anything on either one of the campuses that have really given you a spark of hope, or something interesting that's happened, or a great story that it just goes, yeah, this is going to be okay?
Well, I would say, you know, Pitt's investment in providing a COVID-19 vaccine, I think, is not just a boon for the university, but just for Pittsburgh in general. and everyone in Southwestern Pennsylvania. It's really putting our city and the university on the map in terms of, you know, fighting the illness, which I think is fantastic. Otherwise, I would say across both campuses, you know, I would say for me, one thing that's inspiring is how human-centered this whole process is. You know, it's very easy to get wrapped up in how your business model works and how process works. And, you know, you go through the motions of using that process to solve problems, be it in financial aid or housing or God only knows what. But I've really been inspired by how human-centered this whole thing has been in terms of, you know, administrators at both universities trying to solve these problems and doing it from a very empathetic way. I find that to be very inspiring, and it trickles downhill. It hits the staff, it hits the faculty. It's ironic. It's bringing a lot of people together. It's a unification rallying point. Now, it's not, you know, ubiquitous or universal by any means, but I think it's enough to really set a noticeable shift in academic culture and just a paradigm in thinking. Yeah, so that's what's inspiring to me. And just showing how sort of determined and dogged, you know, academia can be to get through problems and be a part of solving those problems.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
We appreciate you so much.
I know, this is so interesting.
Yeah, I know. We could just go on and on.
I got all the time in the world. You can call me back, or we can keep going.
No, we can't. We will call you. We definitely will call you back. It'll be like summer semester and be like, what are we teaching? But
yeah, seriously.
Yeah. Thank you
Well,
so much, RJ.
No problem. And when you call me back, I'll talk about Plus Public and some of the other stuff that I'm doing. Some really exciting projects ahead.
We absolutely will. We'll do a part two.
Part two.
All right. Sounds
be
good.
Safe. Be safe out there.
Be
You as well.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right.